now that we can create a power-up, we need to come up with a place where we can generate or call this function actually. And the best place for that is actually in our spawn enemies function. And we only want to create power-ups from time to time, so we're going to choose the time and the track randomly. So let's add some code to our spawn enemies function. First of all, we create a random track number as a variable. I'm initializing that with 0. And then I create a constant for create power up. And this is going to be a random Boolean. So I'm using the gameplay kit and using the random source shared random calling next bool. And if we want to create a power up, then we can change the random track number by using, again, the gameplay kit's random source, shared random, next integer, and with a upper bound of 6 plus 1, since we have these 7 tracks on which we can actually place our power-ups. And with that random track number now, we can check if we can generate a power-up, so a power-up object. And now I'm just calling self create power-up for our random track number. And if this works, we can use self add child power-up object. And now let's quickly build that, and this should work. And now the reason why we created the random track number as a variable here on the top is that I'd like to check if we are creating a power-up through all of these tracks that we are generating enemies for. And only if we're not creating a power-up for one cycle of enemies, then I'd like to create an enemy, or I'd like to create enemies for that track. And one easy way to do that is simply adding one more if statement to our for loop and checking if the random track number is not equal to the current counter variable's value. And then we just cut this code, paste it right here, build that again, and this gives us the opportunity to only create enemies if we're not creating a power-up for a specific track. Now let's quickly build that and see if we actually can get some power-ups. So let's see what happens. And I think we indeed get power-ups, but I think we misspelled their image name, and they're also colliding with other objects. So what do we need to do to change that? Well, let's go back into the assets folder. Let's see how we spelled it with a lowercase p. So let's go into the game elements, and as you can see, we misspelled it. We used an uppercase p, so let's change that to a lowercase p. And also let's use the power up sprite, its physics body, and its collision bit mask, and set this to 0 so that it does not collide with any other object. And let's see if it works now. And there we go. We have our first power up. And these look very nice. There are no enemies on the same track and in the same cycle, so also very good. And now all that's missing is that we can collect those power-ups and increase our remaining time. And this is something that, of course, needs to be done in the game scene and in the did_begin contact function. And here there is another thing that we should do, namely adding another else if statement using the player body, its category bit mask, and this should be equal to the player body category. And now we also want to collide with the other body and its category bit mask, which should be the power up category. Power up category. Now, come on, power up category. All right, and if that is the case, I'd like to do 3 things. We have a specific sound for the power-up, which is this one. Let's give it a quick try. It sounds something like this. And this is what we want to hear when we hit a power-up. So let's go back into our game scene, and in our else if block here, we're using self run, and we use an sk action to play a sound. So sk action play sound file named, and we're using power up with the extension, and we wait for completion. Next thing that I like to do is removing the power-up from the scene. So now it's again pretty useful that we can decide, or that we know if which body is actually the power-up. It is the other body in our case and not the player. So I'm taking the other body and its node, and I remove that from parent. And the most important thing now is to increase the remaining time, plus equals 5. And since this is a computed property, the label automatically updates. And now I must be lucky enough to actually hit a power-up to demonstrate that this hopefully works. And actually, I just thought about it, and it cannot work since we forgot one thing, which is in the game elements area, in this game elements extension for the player, because at the moment the contact test bit mask is not set to fire notifications if we're hitting the power-up category. So I also need to add that using the pipe to my contact test bit mask of the player. So now I can run it again, and now I should be lucky enough to hit one of these nice power-ups. So let's see if we can reach one that is, and it works. So cool. So let's do it again maybe, and here we are. And we hit it again. Perfect. So our power-ups work and our game is already pretty cool. Now let's finally add some more context with a start screen or launch screen and some high score overview.